What a joy it is to be here and to be with you. I am excited. I'm excited about what God is doing in the life of our church and what he has yet to do. Thank you for your presence. Now for a few scattered remarks, and I'll bid you good afternoon. One of the saddest funerals I've ever participated in was the funeral of a 22-year-old young man. Let me tell you his story without giving you his name. Happened in 2002. This young man died. He was executed by the state of Texas. At 17 years old, 8 months, and 12 days, he went along with two of his cousins, and he had decided he was going to rob a family for their Mercedes. He and his two cousins went. He did not come from the wrong side of the track. He came from actually sort of an upper middle class family. His mother and father both had prominent jobs. He was the president of the student council. His sisters graduated, gone on a scholarship. He had signed up to go into the Marines, but on this night, he went with some friends. He goes and drives to a town in East Texas, and to steal a family's car, he shoots the man, shoots at the wife, but misses. She plays dead. He drives the car 1 block. It has a flat. He is arrested. His two cousins turn on him, and, well, they tell on him. He is condemned to die. This case is significant because if he had lived 3 years, the United States overturned the idea that if you commit a crime under 18, you couldn't be killed. But what he teaches us is that the danger of living life on the edge is that you might fall off. That the danger of living life in the fast lane is that you reach the end too soon. And none of us can ever get to the point where we think we've gotten life all together. Young people, I want to tell you that life is uncertain as it is, but it is definitely dangerous when you try to live it on the edge. The Bible tells us a story about a young man who lived life on the edge in the book of Acts, the 20th chapter. The Acts, the 20th chapter, in verses 7 through 12. On the first day of the week, we assembled to break bread. Paul spoke to them, and since he was about to depart the next day, he kept on talking until midnight. There were many lights in the room upstairs where we were assembled, and a young man named Eutychus was sitting on a windowsill and sank into a deep sleep as Paul kept on talking. When he was overcome by sleep, he fell down from the 3rd story and was picked up dead. But Paul went down and bent over him, embraced him, and said, "Don't be alarmed, because he's alive." After going upstairs, breaking the bread and eating, Paul talked a long time until dawn. Then he left. They brought the boy home alive and were greatly comforted. The grass withers, the flowers fade, but the word of our God shall stand forever. I want to talk about the danger of living on the edge. The danger of living on the edge. It's an interesting story here in Acts 20. It's the story of a young man named Eutychus. I have to say that because I was talking to Reverend Oza Jones, and he kept saying, Luda. I said, no, not ludicrous. No, I'm just playing. He didn't say that. Eutychus, it's an interesting story because Eutychus's name in the Greek is really a combination. Eu, which means good, E-U, and Tyche in the Greek, which means chance, fortune, luck. His name means good luck or good fortune or good chance. Here is the story. Paul is getting ready to ship out tomorrow. Christians, this is new to them. They don't know. And so he's teaching. Eutychus comes. They're in this place. They're in a building that has, we know, at least 2 stories. They are burning lights. They didn't have electricity. These lamps are burning, and they are not only using up oxygen, but they're giving up heat. Eutychus is on the 3rd floor. He goes and sits by a window when Paul is talking, and Eutychus falls out of the window, and he dies. I started to be real mean and just preach this sermon, don't go to sleep in church or you might wake up dead, but I didn't want to scare anybody this morning. But here is the story, and all of us can identify. It's past midnight. It's hot. Oxygen is being talked about. Paul was not a particularly exciting preacher. That's why when they talk about Apollos being a more polished preacher, Paul is preaching. He is going on and on. And I'd be willing to bet Paul had some of that Black Baptist preaching in there. And Paul probably said, now I'm going to say this and I'm going to close. I'm going to say this and I'm going to sit down. This is my last point. I'm going to say this and then I'm going to be through. And you and I both know that when it comes to African American worship, I'm closing now means absolutely nothing. It means, okay, musicians, let's start the chord. I'm closing now. It means I got at least 10 more minutes of shouting left in me, right? So Paul was like, I'm closing now. Eutychus goes to sleep in the window, and then he falls out and dies. Listen, I can understand Eutychus being tired and sleepy. I can understand Paul being long. You've been in those services where it doesn't matter how good the preacher is preaching. You were running the night before, or maybe it was an evening program. God forbid, in a Baptist church, it was a night service, and you had eaten, and you know you didn't eat salad that day. You kind of had a stroke on a plate, and you came back to church, and you were just tired. I understand Eutychus getting sleepy. I understand him going to sleep in church. But the first question this text raises is, if I'm going to go to sleep, it doesn't make sense to sleep in a window. First thing this text does is it raises a question about risky situations. There are certain places you ought not sit because they lend themselves to you getting in trouble. Somebody should have shouted right there again. Because there are just certain places you ought not hang out. There are certain places you ought not be, because if you are there, you will get yourself in trouble. There are certain places, certain situations you ought not allow yourself to be caught in, because if you're caught in them, they just kind of help you. There are just certain places where when you are there, trouble is easier to get into. I can't get an amen. I'll get out somewhere around here. Eutychus is here, and if you're going to go to sleep, you ought not hang in the window. And I'm wondering, why was Eutychus in the window? Could it have been that Eutychus was more concerned with what was going on the outside than he was with what was going on the inside? I don't know. Maybe Eutychus was more concerned with the world than he was with the word. Maybe Eutychus was more concerned with the external than he was with the eternal. And I wouldn't bring that issue up were it not for the fact that we train our children that what goes on out there is far more important than what goes on in here. All right, you're going to give me that look. I'll tell you. Your child says we need to go to the football game. You give them a $20 bill and say, now, if there's any change left, you bring it back. Mama, I'm going to youth meeting. Here's $1. Put this in church. Oh, you ain't felt me yet. You ain't felt me yet. Okay, now y'all set your clothes out for tomorrow. You know you got to be there. You got 5 children. You're going to get them in 4 different schools. You're going to wake them up at 6. They're going to have themselves together. You're going to have them in school, and then you're going to be on your job on time. During the week, you'll take them to a basketball game or football game. You'll take them to soccer practice. You'll take them to gymnastics or to wrestling. You'll take them to martial arts. But on Saturday, you say, do you feel like going to church? You ain't felt me yet. You ain't felt me yet. I don't need everybody, but I need somebody here to help me understand, to help me in this place to say that what goes on in here is far more important than what goes on everywhere else. When education ceases, when football games are over, heaven and earth may pass away, but the word of God will stand forever. And I need to tell you, it's time that we learn how to put emphasis on the major things and not the minor things. God, deliver me from folk who will spend $200 on a pair of tennis shoes for a child to outgrow in 6 months and complain about the high cost of books. Lord, deliver me from folk who will spend $250 to put braids on a child's head and won't spend $30 on a book to put some in a child's head. Deliver me from folk who make major emphasis on minor stuff. I can't tell you how to raise your children, but I will tell you this. You go ahead and have them spend their whole lives thinking that this is optional. But if they think church is optional, they'll start to think that Jesus is optional. And I need to tell you that you may build cathedrals, grand or small. You may build skyscrapers, large or tall. You may conquer the failures of your past, but only what you do for Christ will last. Well, young people, there are certain places that you ought not sit because they tend to get us in trouble. And you know, the interesting thing about the devil is that the devil never really shows you the complete cost. He just shows you the product. I mean, he doesn't show you how all he shows is he shows you how swole, how cut he is. He shows you young people how fine he is in them jeans he got on. And all he'll show you is how fun it's going to be to ride home with him. He doesn't show you standing in a line trying to get wick and him saying, that ain't my baby, everybody was with her. No, he shows you how cool it is to be riding with your boys, and you know they ain't up to no good. He shows you that. He shows you that everybody going to think you hard because you with them your boys. He shows you that, but he doesn't show you standing before a judge. And the judge telling you that the next 30 years of your life, somebody else is going to tell you when to eat, when to sleep, when to use the bathroom, when to get up, when you can go play. I wish I had somebody. He doesn't show you that, and that's why there are certain places you ought not let yourself get caught, because when you get caught in them, it's hard to get out of. Certain places, and when it comes to sin, I keep telling you, you can't handle the devil. I know you're the smartest person in your class. I know you're so sharp. I know you know more than your parents do. You keep trying to tell them that. But let me just tell you, y'all, you would be surprised how much sense your parents are going to get. Because when I was a boy, I had all the sense like you, but my parents are a whole lot smarter now that I done got to see stuff from their point of view. Because what I didn't understand is that I had never been 40 and 50 like my parents. They had been 16, 17, and 18 like I had. And all the tricks that I thought I could pull, their names were in the index because they helped invent some of those tricks. I didn't understand. And when it comes to the devil, listen, you are just an amateur. He's going to get you every time. I don't need everybody, but I need some folk in here to help me understand that we sat in some places where we shouldn't have sat. And if we hadn't been some places, there were just certain places where they told you not to go. They tell you when you got ready to go, no, you can't go to no party over there because bullets don't have names and addresses on them. You're going to get in trouble. Listen, that was just, I'm finna age myself. Any of y'all remember when we used to have them gas meters outside? When they used to have those natural gas meters and your mama would tell you, don't play on that, they might explode and kill you. They were just saying there's certain places you ought not sit. Certain people my parents didn't let me ride with, they didn't let me hang with. And then they would tell you when you got to church, they say, now you ain't ready for the devil, don't let him ride. No, because if you let him ride, then he'll want to drive. Don't let him ride. Don't let him flag you down, because if he flags you down, he will turn you around. Don't let him flag you down. Be careful where you sit. This text just doesn't say a word about risky situations. It raises a question about responsible supervision. Listen. I've been a child. I have childs. I have a grandchild. I know a child's job is to get away with everything they can. A grown-up's job is to stop them. So my question is, I'm not surprised Eutychus sat in the window. But I am surprised that nobody told him to get down. You act like you don't believe me. When you read Acts 20, when you read what happens with Eutychus, the text says to us that Eutychus he's sitting in the window. It says he sank into a deep sleep. When he was overcome by sleep, he fell down. It wasn't that he sat in the window and fell out. No, he sat in the window. He got sleepy, he got sleepier, he fell, and then he was dead. Now, somewhere between sleeping and falling, somebody should have said something. Now, the first question is, where were his parents? Now, listen, where were his mama and daddy now? Shouldn't one of them have said, no, you can't sit up there? You don't think that Eutychus' parents were so busy with other stuff that they saw the church as a daycare to run and drop Eutychus off and say, you make him be better. You make him do that, but we ain't going to try to make him do it home. You don't think that Eutychus' parents came to church and they shouted so up in the front that they didn't know what Eutychus was doing in the back? You don't think that Eutychus' family came to church and say, listen, I bring him to church. I'm not going to get involved with you, church. That ain't my time. It's my time to get busy. It's my time to get busy with the Lord. I'm spending my time with the Lord. I ain't got time to be back there with him. You don't think that maybe they saw us. Listen, my mother is 85. I am past 50, and my mama still ain't my friend. My father died at 96. And I was not his friend, I was his son. It was never major to him that I liked him. He wanted me to respect him so that he could be the best. Somebody in his mama, his daddy should have said, come sit up here by me. We and I got a responsibility as parents to say that I'm going to take an active role, not only in what he does in church, but what he does in school. Let me say this in the African-American community. When I was growing up, my parents couldn't come to school to be with me like many of you can. They couldn't come because they had to work. They had to work. They had these habits like food and rent they had to take care of. They couldn't come. You've got some time, and you saying it's your me time. You should have thought about your me time before you had those children. And if you got them, we got a responsibility. They ought not just see us when stuff is going wrong. They ought to see us at the other stuff. They ought to see us at PTA meetings. They ought to see us at the children's game. They ought to see us when they're being honored by the National Honor Society. But if his parents hadn't been there, what about his peers? What about his partners? What about Eutychus' boys? Shouldn't one of them say, hey, man, come on, man. Now, you know we weren't raised like that. We were not raised to sit in the windows. We have a responsibility. Listen to me, young people. Friends, don't let friends sit in windows. And a true friend is willing to risk losing a friend to save a friend. T-Bob's Left Eye in Chile told us in that theological discourse they did call waterfalls. Sometimes you got to tell your friends, don't go chasing waterfalls. Please stick to the rivers and the lakes that you're used to. I know you're going to have it your way or nothing at all, but I think you're moving too fast. What about his peers? What about his parents? But what about the pews? I mean, they see him. Shouldn't someone have said? Okay, this is a crash course in Hearn history. I'm sitting in a window. One of these old ladies, old men, boy, get your butt down off that window for I'll whoop you and go tell your mama. Listen. This just family talk. I hear people talking about, and they're criticizing young people. Listen, if you've got the right to criticize, you've got the responsibility to correct. Don't talk to me about a child you won't talk to. And if you don't have, we've got to risk. People say, well, people don't like you to say anything to their children. You just got to get mad at me, because here is what I'm going to do. If your child does well, they won't have a bigger cheerleader than me. But if I see them doing wrong, you ain't got to never speak to me, but I'm going to tell them that I don't want you to mess up like you were going. I owe every child in this congregation to help them to become everything that they can. I owe every child in this congregation some unconditional love, but I also owe them that I'm not afraid to touch you and to call you into account when I see you being less than what God created you to be. We need some people in the pews to say to some children, you're in a risky place. We need some people who aren't afraid of what you used to be, scared your past is going to come out, to say, baby, I've been sitting where you are. It's not a good place. I was listening to Stacey Abrams give the response to the Miss State of the Union address given by a few weeks late, he gave it. But anyway, and Stacey Abrams tells this story that just moved me to no end. She said that her father used to walk sometimes 4 miles to get home from work, and on one time he was walking home, it was cold, and her mother had gone to get her. She said when they picked her father up, he didn't have a coat. So when they picked him up and he didn't have a coat, his wife asked him, where is your coat? And he said, I gave it to a homeless man. I said, why would you give away your coat in the cold? He said, I knew when I left him, he was going to still be alone. But I knew you were coming to get me. And every child at Westside ought to know that about us. That if you fall, we're coming to get you. If you mess up, we're coming to get you. If you make a mistake, we won't stop loving you. If it's cold right now, hang on. Westside got some folk. I wish I had some folk up in here in Westside to say, I'm going to get them. I refuse to let the enemy keep a child. I'm going to get them. If I got to go by the jail cell, I'll go get you. If I got to go by out there on the cuts, I'll go get you. If you're on the street, I'll come get you. Well, let me close. This text says a word about risky situations. It says a word about responsible supervision. But it says a word about the role of the saints. I'm getting off this wagon when I tell you this. What happens, y'all, when Eutychus falls? Eutychus falls. This already warm, late night, there is a tension that is palpable. A silence falls over the building. What do we do? Let me suggest the first thing you got to do is recognize that there's a problem. It is said that on the Titanic, the band kept on playing to make folk forget we'd hit an iceberg. But in some of our communities, y'all, we got some problems. And we can't keep on playing because we can keep the children from preschool to 12 and then we don't see them anymore. We got a problem. And anytime you don't recognize there's a problem, you won't try to fix it. We got to recognize the problem, but how do you, when you recognize the problem, what do? You got to rearrange the program. Don't miss this picture. Paul is preaching, and people are looking forward and upward, but Eutychus has fallen downward and backwards. And Paul said we can't keep on doing what we've been doing. If Paul had kept preaching, Eutychus would have stayed on the ground dead. Paul says you can't keep doing what you've been doing and expect to get new stuff. That if you always do what you've always done, you'll always have what you already got. Preach, Delvin. I am, yeah. And so if we're going to get new stuff, if we're going to get some new things, you got to try some new stuff. I hear people all the time telling me, well, it don't take all that in church. You know, when I was growing up, we didn't have dancing in the church. Yeah, but when you were growing up, when I was growing up, I didn't have third graders taking guns to school. When I was growing up, I was not only challenged to have sex in the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, but to decide what my sexual orientation was going to be. When I was growing up, I didn't have 5th graders dealing drugs, so I can't do what I used to do. Y'all ain't going to help me preach this morning. You got to rearrange the program. We got to make priority. And I tell you, you know how folk know that they're a priority? Because you put money in it. If you put money in everything else and don't put in a particular ministry, it says that they're not important to you. You've got to change so that you rearrange your program. I like what Paul does. I'm trying not to holler, but I think I will. What Paul does is he recognizes the problem, he rearranges the program, and the text says that Paul goes and lays himself on the boy, and the boy comes back. That when we recognize the problem and rearrange the program, we need some resurrection power. Listen, the world can write off children who fall, but we can't do that. People keep telling me anything dead ought to be buried. Well, that's okay for the world to say. We're not in the burying thing. We're in the resurrection thing. Because we believe you can die and still, somebody ought to help me right through there. So that we've got to be about the business of touching lives. And can I tell you, you can't resurrect a child that you won't touch. You've got to be willing to get personally involved. Paul goes and breathes on him, and we need some people here at Westside that when our Eutychuses have fallen, to say to them, baby, you ain't the first person to mess up. You ain't the last person. You can keep on going. We need some Eutychuses to have some testimonies that can say, you looking at somebody who was pregnant at 16. They wrote me off. But last week when I sat at my desk and saw my master's degree, I said, he's the God who resurrects. I need some Eutychuses in here. Some folk who could say that at 17 they said I wouldn't be anything. But God had his hand on me. Is there anybody here who knows that God will pick you up? He'll turn you around. He'll resurrect you. I'm on my way to my seat. I'm on my way to my seat. But I need to tell you that when we rearrange our program, recognize our problem, and we show resurrection power, we ought to have some real praise. The Bible says that when they brought him back, they were not a little comforted. I need to tell you that every time we get a Eutychus who comes back because they have fallen, we ought to be stumbling over ourselves to try to encourage them. When they mess up and come back, they don't need us to tell them what they've done. They need us to show them what they can be. I'm closing with a nursery rhyme. But when I was a boy, they told me about Humpty Dumpty. They said Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty back together again. But let me tell you the problem with Humpty. It wasn't that he sat on a wall. It wasn't that he had a great fall. Humpty had the wrong king. I sat on the wall. I had a great fall. But King Jesus, he picked me up. Is there anybody here who can say he'll pick you up? Ain't he all right? Ain't he all right? Won't it pick you up? Won't it give you another chance? Yes, yes, yes. Young people, if you're here today, I want you to know that your failure isn't fatal, nor is it final. God is the God who puts back broken pieces. I wish I had some fallen folk in here who can say, I messed up, but the Lord gave me another chance. And since he's given me another chance, I'm going to praise his name. Every chance I get, I'm going to praise his name. From the rising of the sun to the going down of the same. Hey, 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 hey. I'm going to praise his name. We serve a God who can pick up broken pieces and put them back together again. That's the good news. The good news is that even broken pieces can be placed back together if you put them in the master's hand.